other items. Got it. All right. They acquire things, laundry, other items, just random debris that isn't really useful. Now, those big heavy exercise machines tend to get traded around to different places. I was at my friend's house and his mom was like, hey, I really need help moving this. You two strapping young men, please help me. So we loaded it into the back of a pickup truck. And I'm like, hey, Chad, let's just tie this off real quick. And he's like, can you handle that? And I looked at him perplexed. This is a mechanical engineer, very bright individual, ex-Marine. And he's like, I just don't do knots. And it really brought up a big question mark for me. You don't do knots? Like, you don't know knots? You don't understand them, or they just don't work? And this guy he's a monster. He's like 280 pounds of muscle, like just a huge gorilla type guy. He's like, well, I tend to break rope and I don't know how to put them together right. And so I had an impromptu knot tying lesson just in the middle of moving something. So today I'm going to show you a couple knots and show you why they're important. Signs of a good knot. The sign of a good knot is a knot that you can untie after you're done with it. One of the worst knots in the world, so here's my rope. I hope you guys can see this enough. One of the worst knots in the world is called the overhand knot. Because when you put this under a lot of tension for a long time, it is almost impossible to get out of some ropes, most ropes. If you do one more wrap around and put it through, it's called a figure 8 knot. It looks kind of like an 8 if you go vertically. This knot, almost whatever amount of tension you can put on it, you can pop the sides. Very good, useful knot. For those that climb, if you go and you do a figure 8 knot, this is one of your essential skills for climbing. There we go. So wrap once, twice, around, figure 8. If this is your end going around into your harness, you're going to go back through it and around, and this is getting a bit lost. But okay. Reset. You can take this and you can double it. 2 lengths of rope is fine. That's what's used in climbing inside of your carabiner, but you don't tie it that way. And I'm not going to show you how because I don't have a carabiner handy. All right, figure 8 knot, done. That one is really good for being on the end of a rope to stop things, to make sure that if you have it through a piece, if you tie a figure 8, so this is in sailing and whatnot, it acts as a stopper knot. So if you have a pulley or a block and you don't want it to go through, that will stop, yet you can pull it back out. So very useful knot, figure 8. Next super useful knot is called a bowline. How many people have heard of a bowline? Everybody, cool. Tying a bowline is very simple but effective, but it's also one that really tricks with people's minds. And I'm going to show you a method to learn how to tie a bowline that works really, really well, and you won't forget. So when I was a kid in Scouts, and you can't see my head, but that's not the important part right here, we would go and we would have knot tying contests. And so you have one kid at each end of a rope. You put a little bit of slack out. So you, with one hand, whatever hand, right or left, doesn't matter. And it's good to practice with both. You take this and you have your tailing end. So pretend that one of you is holding this end, or it's wrapped around your waist. You go and you take this, go inside, tickle your belly button, and pop the knot around your wrist. So you have a little bit of a loop on this tailing end that's hanging out, wrap it around, and then pull your hand through as quickly as possible, and then pop the knot. What that does is whoever on each end, whoever ties the knot first gets the knot, and then they lean back and they catch the other person's wrist in the rope. So it's a really good, fun game that you can play with kids and teach them how to tie knots and how to tie a bowline. And it gets really, really fun because you have that competition element and you have the ability to tie it with one hand. Because if you are down a cliff, if you've fallen in a certain place, you've hurt an arm, you can tie a knot that will help rescue you if somebody's trying to pull you up. So very important skill set to learn. Now, a bowline, boom, goes through, there we go, yeah, goes through the running end. So we have, this is very challenging to do with this rope. So you're here, kind of dip it under, and you can see how we have just one loop and another loop. Take this loop around the running end and then bring it back through. There's like all sorts of little rabbit goes through the hole around the tree and back into the hole, and other methods for people to remember how to do it. The basic idea is you need to make sure that you have 2 ropes in parallel, one going the other way with a little knot around it. Now this is a good knot because you can always take this piece and flip it open, and that will loosen the knot up. Now, something that doesn't come, that most people don't think about when it comes to a bowline, is where this tail goes. Some people have the tail on the outside, other people have tail on the inside. As a sailor, having the tail on the inside makes a huge difference, because if it's on the outside, it can catch on things, and it does all the time when you're running through rigging. So I'm a proponent of putting on the inside. That's a giant battle that has been waged for thousands of years, probably, between people. So it's up to you for your opinion. One other part of knot work, and it's something I came up with as a small kid, was how do you store rope? You can loop it, all sorts of different tying methods and doing it to carry it. But if you want to get a lot of rope into a small amount of space that's easily deployable, a lot of people will do a magic chain. So that's where you make one loop, put a loop through, and that's a slip knot. Well, you continue to do those slip knots, they form a chain. So you can take up 3 times the amount of rope in the space. So basically your rope is 1/3 as long as it was. And then you can take this and just pull, and it magically comes out. As a kid, I was wondering if there's a better way to do it. And so with it, if you go and you start in the middle of your rope, you have a little loop here, you can flip this through and form that same type of slip knot, except for here, you feed this end through, and then you slip and tighten it back. Then you feed this end through, and you slip, you tighten it back, and you repeat the process a few times. And with this rope, it's a little stiff, so it's not folding super tight, but others will get into the point where it's like a weave, like a braid. And this will take up 6 times the amount of rope. So it's a lot shorter in the amount of time. And then you can deploy it only one loop at a time, unless you pull both ends at once, and then it all comes out. So by doing a double magic chain, I was able to make belts, and I made a lot of webbing belts for a lot of the scouts that we had in our troop. And I've passed those out to hundreds of people now. With those, you're able to do in just a belt amount, a normal belt for somebody, you're able to have 30 feet of rope. So if you're camping, hiking, backpacking, those type of things, 30 feet of rope, you can do a lot with. You can save a life, you can put up a tent, you can put up a tarp, you can tie things down. And the webbing I like to use is bull tape or pull tape. It's called both. It's what they use to pull wires through electrical cables. So like your overhead electrical type stuff, they use this bull tape. It's this white Kevlar line that has something like a 10,000 pound test on it. Depends on the variety. I've seen 7,000 to 10,000 pounds, and something a little bit bigger than this. So super strong. You can tow a car with it, and you can get a hold of this for free. Often, if you go and you see electrical workers, like utility workers going, they will basically only be able to use this once. So they'll pull wire through a cable, and they have a giant pile of this really awesome Kevlar webbing. So I encourage you, if you ever driving by, just stop and ask them. I've been given half an empty spool because like, hey, we can't reload it, go for it. So I had a nice 400-foot spool of webbing. It was great. So those are just a few knots that can help you when you're in your everyday life. If you can't tie down a load from a trailer, and this is something I've come across before. Oh, I'm seeing red. Good. Oh, final story. I'm in college. We're getting ready to leave from the dorms. We're unloading, and our rugby team would help people move in and move out all the time. It was a good recruiting tool. But we're there and we're just watching this guy, and something's not right. And I just kind of pull a bunch of people over and we're just like, what is wrong with this? And he's kind of there and he's seeing this crowd looking at him. And I was like, would you like some a suggestion of help or not? And he's like, no, I got it. I'm like, I'm giving you a giant warning. If you drive right now, you're going to be really regretting this later. And he looked at me really quizzically and I went, what are you attaching that rope to? Well, he was putting it through the wheel well of his tire, like through one of the holes on his tire. So he had it nice and secured down. It wasn't going to go anywhere until he started to move. And then that strap was going to roll in the tire and cause a lot of chaos. So the idea of learning how to tie knots, learning how to hold loads down, those are essential skills that people overlook. So I encourage you, if you don't know knots, there's a lot of stuff on YouTube University to find ways to do it and better ways to show than I just did. But it's a valuable tool and something that can save your life and can help you in any situation. Back to you, Mr. Toastmaster.